What's going on? You ready to get started?
I am ready.
Sounds good. So we got the man, the myth, the legend, Jon Anik. So I appreciate you coming on, man.
Oh, it's good.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Where are you guys?
So I'm in Orlando. You know Orlando, like up
Yeah.
Central Florida. And
All right.
David, where you at right now?
Yeah, so I'm from Charlotte, but I'm in North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina with my family right now. So on a family vacation. So
Beautiful. Well, it's good to be with you, fellas.
Well, like I said, appreciate you coming on. So first thing I wanted to ask you was your next broadcast is going to be UFC 291.
Yes, sir.
And so kind of what are your thoughts on that? I guess I know Costa and Khamzat. I mean, Costa's been moved to the Abu Dhabi card. So there's been a little bit of a change up. But what are your thoughts, I guess, from main event starting with Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje?
So I'm sitting talking to you guys at a time where my fight card has a lot of like black lines through it because Paulo Costa obviously is no longer fighting, and it looks like they're still looking for a replacement potentially for Jake Matthews. But yeah, this main event's very exciting, and it's worthwhile of 5 rounds. It's worthwhile of the BMF title. It's worthwhile for both individuals to get pay-per-view points. And I think when Justin Gaethje sort of puts it in perspective and talks about historically how many guys are really going to get a chance to fight for this BMF belt, whatever you think of it, right, as an individual entity, how many guys are going to fight for it? And right now the list is Jorge Masvidal, Nate Diaz, and these two, which is exceptional in terms of legendary status, in terms of the overall sport and the fan base. So it's a huge fight, and it's very close if you guys are bettors at all in terms of the betting line, right? So people are, it's commanding two-way action. I was able to go to ATT, which is about 10 minutes from where I am in South Florida, and sit down with Dustin a few weeks ago. He fasts every Saturday during training camp. He is all systems go. And yeah, it's a huge fight. I mean, it feels like a title fight for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. Speaking on that, on the Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier fight, do you think Masvidal, is he going to be bringing out the BMF belt, or we don't know for sure yet?
I guess I could pull up my television format and see if he's in format, but no, I don't know the answer to that right now. It seemed like Dana White enjoyed that idea, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, I can't confirm that for you right now.
Sounds good, David. You got anything to add on that?
yeah, what about the Jan Pereira fight? What are your thoughts on that?
So I'm sort of glad, and maybe it'll be elevated to a title fight, but I don't think that's going to happen. I'm sort of glad they didn't elevate this to a title fight. I think it's a worthwhile 3-round co-main event, true title eliminator. And depending on Yuri Prochazka's calendar, you have the winner of this fight challenge him for the light heavyweight title, assuming that the winner of this fight gets out injury-free. It's a fascinating fight and a huge test, obviously, for Alex Pereira at 205 pounds. But I do feel confident that Pereira can make middleweight again, and I wouldn't necessarily believe that he has shut the door on 85. So it stands to reason that 205 could be his best weight class, but we just don't know that yet. Even Dominic Cruz enjoys that struggle down to 35. He always told me, and I don't think this is going to happen now, that he would take a fight at 45 before his career was over. But he enjoys some of that struggle. And for Alex Pereira, he had really wrapped his head around getting down to 85. And he moved up to 205 because it seems like it's going to be a pretty expeditious championship path. But yeah, I think he and Jan both have a great chance to knock each other out. I wouldn't be surprised to see Jan try to grapple, but Alex is strong as hell. And I wouldn't be at all surprised as Alex Pereira gets extended in these UFC fights to see his grappling shine, as crazy as that may sound. So we'll see what happens. I'm excited to see how it plays out. And obviously we're excited to call it.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be a good one. And what are your thoughts on Tony Ferguson and Bobby Green? How do you think that one plays out?
Oh, a couple of wild men. And I mean that with all due respect. I truly don't know how the hell it's going to play out. But I do think Tony's better than all these red stripes on his Wikipedia page, right? I feel pretty close with both guys, but it certainly would be nice to see Tony fare well. He doesn't have to win the fight, but really to fare well and be competitive because, as I mentioned, I do think he's been more competitive than maybe the wins and losses suggest. And yeah, I mean, if you're asking me if Bobby Green is closer to his fighting prime and you're not, maybe that is the case, but I really don't know. Bobby Green's speed is something that everybody has to deal with. But Tony Ferguson's a wild man. He's going to come in shape, and I still think he can take a shot better than people believe. The Michael Chandler shot was, 1 in, I don't know, 500. So, yeah, I'm excited for that fight, and it just adds to the card, right? Like Tony's just special, man. You guys, I'm a broken record when it comes to Tony Ferguson, but first 155 pounder to put a double-digit winning streak on paper. It's absolutely insane that he never fought for the undisputed championship. And anything I can do to get Tony Ferguson or one of his fights in the Hall of Fame, I'll be trying to do that. So we'll see.
Awesome, man. And even the undercard, I think, is Wonder Boy. He's on the prelims, isn't he?
He is. He is the featured prelim on ABC and ESPN. And, it stands to reason that more eyeballs could be on that fight than a given pay-per-view fight. And that's why it's strategically put there. But yeah, it speaks to the depth of the card. I mean, Derek Lewis has more knockouts than anyone, I believe, in UFC history, and has main evented 1 million times. And he is fighting before Wonder Boy on the prelims. So, yeah, it's pretty loaded.
Yeah, it's going to be a great card for sure. David, you got anything?
Yeah, I guess changing lanes a little bit and throwing it back, I guess, for you. But I wanted to ask you about covering Elite XC days, covering those. I think KJ Noon's Crazy Horse Bennett. I saw an MMA Junkie article on that. So I guess kind of explain what that was like and how many events you covered and things like that.
So we were covering that event that you referenced in 2007 in Tunica, Mississippi. And we were covering it with our boxing show. It was Elite XC1. So it was their first event. And Gary Shaw wanted to get boxing media there. So he paid for us to go. And it had so many future MMA superstars and probably a lot of present MMA superstars, but I didn't really know MMA. I was going there as a boxing purist and as a boxing radio journalist and as somebody who defended boxing. And it really opened my eyes to mixed martial arts. It just had so much to offer as a sport, as a sporting live event. Gina Carano fought Julie Kedzie that night. You mentioned Charles Crazy Horse Bennett, Frank Shamrock and Renzo Gracie in the main event. It really just opened my eyes to everything that boxing wasn't, which was to say just entertaining in totality, like for 15 minutes and not a lot of holding and referee involvement. At first, I was a naysayer because I was defending boxing against this MMA avalanche, and there were dragons breathing fire at the event. And I was like, come on, boxing wouldn't have the fucking dragons breathing fire. What is this noise? But I watched that live event and everything changed for me. That sounds super motion picture. It wasn't necessarily everything crystallized that night, but I went from someone who was maybe an MMA naysayer to being like, this sport's the future. This is much more exciting than boxing. Why don't I get on this train? And shortly after I did.
I definitely can see, I remember how I got into it was just watching my sister did the national anthem at a regional promotion in my hometown. And I just went to this fight as a kid. And then that kind of led me to watching Diaz on the Ultimate Fighter. It was kind of the same thing of wow, seeing it live. I seen it on TV and I seen boxing on TV, but seeing it live was a lot different, even on a regional level. And that was the same way. I was just looking at the lights and looking at the live and hearing the punches and things like that. So I agree with that.
Yeah, well,
kind of
people
the wow factor of it.
See, and that's cool about her singing. I will say, people who haven't been to a UFC live event, and I wish I had tickets for everybody. Oftentimes my tickets go to fans, but go to a UFC live event because I do think it'll change you. And we don't need everybody to be hooked for 41 Saturday nights a year, but we need you for the pay-per-views and for, another 10 to 12 a year, 25 weekends a year. We need you.
Right.
For sure. And John, I wanted to ask you about this. So I know you probably talked about it a bunch, but the story behind betting Kenny Florian that Nate Diaz would not defeat Conor at UFC 196.
Yeah.
So how was that getting you? So you got a 209 tattoo?
Yeah. So, and I'll try to tell this story as efficiently as possible, but I've done several tattoo bets on the Anik and Florian podcast. We actually have one live right now with Dracus Duplessis, which we can get into if you really want. But basically the circumstance was that Nate Diaz was coming off a vacation in Cabo to fight a seemingly prime Conor McGregor. And I wasn't calling the pay-per-views at the time. This was a time when I was perhaps waywardly, but making picks on the Anik and Florian podcast. And this was the last time I ever predicted a fight on the record for obvious reasons, calling fights and now calling the biggest fights. Shouldn't be doing that. So Nick Diaz was always my favorite fighter. I always wanted a tattoo. I wanted the 209 tattoo. And I thought Conor was going to win the fight. I mean, let's be clear. But I thought this would be a creative way to bring attention to our podcast. As a radio guy, we always used to do stupid bits like this. This was not the first tattoo bet I did on the Anik and Florian podcast. The first one was for Betch Kohei. If she beat Ronda Rousey, I was getting the Brazilian flag tattooed on my arm. But nobody talked about that bet. This bet surfaced on Nate Diaz's radar. When I started talking about it on the podcast, I called Kenny Florian that day. I was like, what do you think? He's like, you're out of your fucking mind. I was like, yeah, we're doing it. So my wife was like, you're just an idiot. And that's fine. So I did the tattoo bet, and I didn't think nobody listened to our show back then. I didn't, and so Nate all of a sudden got wind of this and pushed out some tweet. And then he said on a mic, if Jon Anik doesn't get a 209 tattoo, I'm going to whoop his little ass. And it became just this larger than life thing, which I did not expect. My boss is calling me. I didn't know if my job was going to be threatened. So it came to a point where I was going to get the tattoo, whether he won the fight or not. It made for a better story that he beat Conor. But ultimately it was meant, as a twofold thing, right? Like for me, I thought it'd be great. I would never do a tattoo bet if I didn't want the tattoo. I got conned into this stupid fucking South Africa flag tattoo bet that I don't actually want. But the Brazilian flag had sentimental meaning to me. There's usually a purpose behind it. But that's the story on the 209. And I'm glad I've since seen Nate multiple times, but that first interaction, I didn't know it was going to happen. But we're all good there. And, I think he knew in some part this was meant as a measure of respect. So there you have it.
Cool. I appreciate you sharing that with us. And have you talked to Nate recently about his upcoming boxing fight with Jake Paul?
I have not. But do you see this? I mean, I don't know if you guys are audio or video only, but do you see this? I mean, look at this guy, man. That's more of a tribute. That's more of a tribute to him than probably the 209 tattoo is,
That's cool, man. But speaking on that, how do you think that's going to go? You think Nate can be one of the first MMA guys to pull off the win on Jake Paul?
I'm anxious, right? I have not been nervous during this conversation until now. And I think you know why, because I think we all would like to see Nate win that fight. And I like Jake, right? Like I'm a big fan of, hardest worker in the room. And I think Jake Paul, more often than not, is working harder than your average boxing or MMA fighter. I appreciate Jake Paul's hard work, the way he's monetized himself and created his brand. His desire to be a great boxer is there. And I think he has some skill. And his direction and his intention are clear. But hopefully Nate gets it done, boys, right? I mean,
of course.
I don't know what to tell you. I think he's more competitive than the betting line indicates. Nate is. So I think there's value right now on Nate. But, he's fighting a bigger man. And I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic that Nate can get it done. He looks big. He looks in shape, and he's going to need to be. He can certainly take a shot. And, wouldn't that be something if he, if he got it done? We would all have reason to celebrate. And I say that with all due respect to Jake.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with you. David, do you want to add anything on that?
No, I agree with you too. I just think that for MMA fans, it's kind of like a break if Nate wins. Like obviously, like you said, respect to Jake, but it's like we need that break in the action where we see the MMA guys go in boxing. So.
We've just sent a lot of the wrong guys in there. And I would never, as like a New England Patriots fan, ever say we, but I feel like sometimes we can say we about mixed martial arts. We're sending Ben Askren in there. The single greatest sports betting opportunity of anybody's lifetime was Jake Paul at like a 2-1 clip against Ben Askren. Insanity. Yeah. But then even Tyron Woodley had a much better shot, but it just wasn't sending the right guy in there at the right time. Nor was Anderson Silva. Nate Diaz could be the right guy at the right time. We just don't know.
He could. I mean, I think he can give Jake problems. I mean, I guess we'll see. But anyways, we'll change subjects a little bit. How is your like a typical day for Jon Anik? With how busy you are?
Well, it depends. So like right now, I'm talking to you guys the week before a pay-per-view. And so between now and tomorrow at this time, I will voice UFC 291, which is a lot of the in-arena stuff. A lot of the combo features you hear in the arena will be voiced. I have all the bios printed right now. I'm starting to to lay out my, my fighter cards. And we begin the process about 10 days out. It's 9 days out right now. And it starts with the voiceovers. And then I begin my fighter preparation. And then it evolves into the show formatics. But we work weekends essentially. Like even when I'm home, I do work a lot on the weekends circumstantially. It's just kind of the way it falls. So we'll do our podcast. We'll tape 2 episodes on Sunday. So I'll feel pretty prepared, I would think, by Sunday. I'll probably go to the Palm Beach County Public Library on Monday and sit and try to do some fighter preparation there. And then as it gets closer, it becomes a lot of like show stuff and a lot of stuff that doesn't have to do a lot with fighting, and a lot of Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel stuff that I can do without. But yeah, man, it's like a sprint up to every pay-per-view, and then I collapse after them 12 times a year,
Yeah. David, you want anything to add?
Yeah, so I guess like you kind of mentioned it, but going to the library, so you do find kind of, I guess you got to get yourself kind of in that headspace to prep for like 4 to 6 hours to make flashcards, to get on the Excel, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in my home studio right now, which is in my master bedroom, and it's very quiet, but the study room is like, there's nothing quite like that, right? In terms of just shutting myself off from the world. I mean, I can turn my phone off and really dive in from home, but I do think the short 5-minute drive to the library gets me in the right headspace. And yeah, there's no doubt I'll crank out more fighter cards per hour when I'm there. Sometimes it can be a little bit finicky though when you're watching mixed martial arts at the because I'd like to have the film on as I'm filling out the card, and I don't want to have the the obnoxious announcers, the UFC commentators, too loud when I'm watching film at the library. But yeah, no, I mean, obviously I have to embrace the journey and think like, man, I'm getting paid in some respect right now to watch MMA, right? But you write enough fighter cards, you write 10, 15, 20,000 fighter cards by hand, and anything can feel like a job at some point in time. But I have the job I want, and try to keep it every show.
That's awesome, man. And I think it's cool. So your brother Jason, does he schedule and manage like coming on different podcasts for you? Is that
so? He has started to do some of that. I really can't do as much of it as I used to be able to do, but he does some of that and handles some sponsorship and some management stuff. And yeah, he's a very capable guy who doesn't have a job right now, so I'm trying to keep him employed. And he's navigating the MMA media space a little bit, and getting his real estate license and doing some other things. So yeah, it's good to have him with me on the road. It prevents me from just being in my own headspace for hours on end as I'm, prepping and sitting in my room. So it's been nice to have him on board a little bit.
Yeah. Is that your twin brother?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I've seen that you had an identical twin, or do you have multiple?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool,
Yep.
man. And another thing I was going to bring up. So is Colby Covington ever coming back? What's the deal with that?
Gosh, man, I really don't have anything insightful or anything resembling informed speculation for you.
Yeah.
I think you both know at this point that Islam Makhachev and Charles Oliveira in a rematch has been announced as the main event, which would, well, maybe it hasn't been announced as the main event, but it's been announced as a title fight. And gosh, I don't know. It'd be hard pressed to have any fight be bigger than that one, right? But you would, by weight class, have Leon and Colby, if they were fighting in Abu Dhabi, be the headlining act there. So yeah, I don't think he's fighting in Abu Dhabi. Maybe it would be Madison Square Garden. I just don't know, fellas. I really, truly don't know. I don't have any issue either with Colby fighting for the title, but we got to move this thing along, right? I mean, Leon did defend in March, and if you take Colby at his word, Colby wanted to fight him in a pay-per-view in July here 3 days from now in England, and Leon wanted a little bit more time. As the champion, I would think you would have that right. Aljamain Sterling is another story, I guess. But yeah, I truly don't know in terms of Colby. I'm hopeful that we'll see him at Madison Square Garden, but I have no inside information.
No, for sure. I mean, love him or hate him. I mean, as a fan, I mean, I think everybody wants to see Colby back, and we want to see Leon defend his title too soon. So I guess we'll see, right? David, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think me and Andrew's talked about it a few times. I just think whether fans like it or not, I think that Bilal Leon is happening probably prior to Colby getting the title shot. At this point, that's just kind of what the weather looks like to me. And that's what we've kind of talked about a few times on the podcast and off air and things like that.
I don't know, man. So I do know that Bilal is willing to sit right now, but I just don't understand. I would imagine in the next 2 weeks, right? If they're starting to announce October UFC 294, I would imagine the next few weeks we get an announcement. But I find it very hard to believe, as Bilal's dear friend, that he's going to somehow leapfrog Colby, unless there's some circumstance that I don't know about preventing Colby from fighting. But I do believe, if I was a betting man, I would place a significant wager on Colby Covington being next for Leon. And let us just hope that it's November and not a day later than that show second week, Madison Square Garden.
For sure.
For sure.
Now I'm going to change subjects a little bit. Jamal Hill and his injury. What are your, I mean, we talked about it a little bit in the beginning, but I mean, what are your thoughts on him vacating the title and kind of doing the same thing Jiri Prochazka did?
Well, an injury can happen at any point in time, but hopefully it's a lesson to him and all of the athletes, especially at the championship level, that you kind of got to be more disciplined about being closer to the weight and just be more preventative when it comes to freak things like this happening, right? Because I would certainly, as his manager, say no 5-on-5 basketball until your UFC career is over. Like, is that too much to ask? Certainly there are clauses like that in a lot of other professional athletes' contracts. Now, I know the UFC does not have a collective bargaining agreement. The fighters do not, and there are a lot of issues when it comes to that. And I don't even know if he sustained the injury during a basketball game, but it's just disappointing, right, to see the championship paydays potentially go away for any measure of time for his next fight. I guess it won't be a title defense, but hopefully he would still get pay-per-view points or some sort of financial consideration. It's just really too bad. And I don't know. I just think for these champions, when you get the belt, you just never know what can happen. So be of a mindset where you want to try to defend this thing as many times as possible. Be of a Volkanovski Adesanya mindset and make that be a part of the way you handle every day. And I say that with all love to Jamal. And I don't even know, I mean, he could have done it during training and then it speared its ugly head when he was on a basketball court. Who knows? But I'm excited to see him back because he's an American athlete. When he was headlining against Glover Teixeira in Brazil in January, the night he won the title, I sort of said something in the pay-per-view open, it's not American arrogance, but American athleticism. And historically, Americans have done really well in the UFC, God damn it. So it's too bad that American champion is having to vacate his title. So yeah, I'm hopeful that when he comes back, he'll be even better than ever.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll be back good. I mean, I don't see any issues with, I mean, he seems like that type of guy that has the drive to get to that point. David, you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, I guess not changing, so I guess change a little, but I guess UFC 293, is that Sean Strickland and Izzy? Is that official, or is that just something that's popped up so far? I know I saw on a couple MMA forums, but have you heard anything on that end of the
that
Sean
is not official
thing happening at 293?
That is not official, and I don't want to South.
I didn't think so.
No, and I don't want a South Africa flag tattooed on me. Okay, like I had no intention of doing a tattoo bet, and we're doing the Ray Longo minute on our podcast, and he's like, I said something about if Dracus du Plessis can beat Robert Whittaker at UFC 290 and then turn around 9 weeks later and beat Israel Adesanya, singularly, that might be the greatest accomplishment in mixed martial arts history, beating those two guys, arguably the two greatest middleweights of all time. I know Anderson Silva is better than Robert Whittaker historically, right? But Robert Whittaker, Hall of Famer, Izzy, Hall of Famer. You beat both of those guys in 9 weeks, you're Dracus du Plessis. So I said something about how amazing an accomplishment that would be. And then Ray Longo was like, why don't you get a tattoo? And I was like, all right, if he does that in 9 weeks, I'll get a South Africa flag tattoo, which I didn't necessarily want to do. But part of the reason I would get the tattoo bet is because it's a long shot to whatever degree. And part of that tattoo bet was rooted in du Plessis not being able to make the walk 9 weeks later. It's just asking a whole lot. Right. Supposedly his foot sore. If you saw him at the post-fight press conference, his hands were swollen as hell. So it's a long-winded way of saying it was very ambitious to think du Plessis was going to turn around in 9 weeks. I don't have anything for you on whether or not Strickland's official, but I think it makes sense. I think in a meritocracy, Strickland is pretty deserving, not quite as deserving as du Plessis, but still deserving. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see that be the fight. And if that's the case, no tattoo, baby. No tattoo. Because he's got to do it in 9 weeks. Got to do it in 9 weeks.
For sure. Lastly, do you have any suggestions, thoughts on kind of what we're doing on our podcast? Anything that we need to work on?
So you both sound good for starters. You both are handsome men, so that's good. No, I mean, I think it's about consistency and content, right? And I don't know how often you're doing the show, but certainly trying to do 40 shows a year should be a goal. I would think if the UFC can do 40 shows a year and you guys are passionate enough about mixed martial arts, then absolutely, it's interesting too, like guests can go both ways, right? Like I do a lot of fighter meetings and talking to fighters. So when I do a podcast, right, like you guys may want to talk to your boys more than you enjoy talking to certain fighters or certain personalities, but maybe moves the needle to actually talk to fighters, right? Most of the fighters you see on our podcast, respectfully, they've asked to come on the show. We love providing them that platform. But for the most part, give me my best friend, Ken Flo, give me that fucking crazy Ray Longo, whom I love, and give me whom I think is the best handicapper in the space, Brian Petrie, and off we run. But no, I think you guys are doing all the right things. Just try to be consistent with it, whether, you're getting watched by, 40 people or 40,000,
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. David, you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, I think we started this in February, and I think I think your episode makes it 25 or 26 for us now since February, and just staying consistent. We started with a lot of the veterans, Jeff Munson and guys like that, and it's kind of built up where we've built relationships, like you said, with 3 or 4 guys we've had on a couple of times, and we've just kind of been hungry and enjoyed doing it and kind of reaching out and being in that chase of getting guests on. And
it's good, man.
From here.
I agree. And, obviously if you have guests, then you can tell other people, hey, we've had this person on our show. But yeah, I do think that what James Lynch and a lot of the other journalists have done in terms of cultivating relationships with athletes outside the UFC, and then they get on this path through the Contender Series, which is the primary conduit, and then they get in, and then you have these relationships, and then short notice or otherwise, they get these big opportunities and they want to talk to guys like you because they're comfortable with guys like you. They've been talking to you guys from day one, and then you'll always get that time with them. And again, there are a lot of guys who are just coming up, like Chepe Mariscal, who we just gave a platform on the Anik and Florian podcast because I felt like his UFC debut didn't even get the shine that it deserved. So yeah, I mean, I think just keep doing it, keep being every week, and go from there.
All right, well, I appreciate it, man. And where do you get that t-shirt at? Do you have your own merch?
Yeah, right now we sell this at millions.co. This is a special design we did for John Jones, who came back in March of this year. So we did a little goat design for Johnny Bones. And the fans have fun with it a little bit. We're revamping our Anik and Florian podcast store. And hopefully some of this will be a part of that as well. But yeah, man, it's fun. It's just leaning into it as best I can. The One More Sleep thing sort of originated organically just on Twitter before UFC pay-per-views in like 2016. And now we're selling merch, Too bad there's a Christmas song. Otherwise, we'd probably have a rap song, One More Sleep,
Well, cool, man.
For sure. Well,
anything you want to add, John?
No, I appreciate you guys. And thanks everybody for the support. Obviously, it means a lot and gives me a lot of confidence and energy, going to the booth on fight night. So thank you guys for that.
Yeah, for sure, man. Keep it up. Yeah, we love hearing you guys on fight night. It's awesome.
Thank you, buddy.
Yep.
For sure. Anyways, thank you. It's been an honor.
Thank you, boys. Appreciate your time. We'll do it again.
Appreciate it, man. Sir. Thanks.
Have a good day. See you, boys.
See you.